The wind is soft tonight. It brushes through the trees like a whisper, bending the branches only just enough to be noticed. Somewhere beyond the windows, a lantern flickers against the wooden walls of a house long ago. The moon has risen, but it hides behind a veil of clouds. The hours are long and low. The world feels hushed and folded in on itself, as if every house has turned inward, every candle has dimmed its flame just a little. Even the birds have grown still in the trees, their feathers ruffled in sleep. Just a gentle silver light, just enough to make the sky glow pale. This moment holds no weight, no rush, no need to remember or decide. It simply is. A small village under gray skies, wrapped in fields and forests, where time stretched slowly between sun and snow. The people lived simply, worked quietly, and watched the seasons pass like chapters in a long-forgotten book. You are there now, watching from the edges. Just the soft earth beneath your feet and a wind that carries the faintest scent of smoke and old wood. A few stars blink through from time to time, peeking, pausing, then tucking themselves back in. Its glow moves lazily, casting warm, honey-colored shadows across the floor. Oh, the night is quiet, not silent, but filled with the hush of leaves, the sigh of the earth, the hush of distant creatures settling into their places. This is the kind of evening that asks nothing of you, except that you breathe in slowly and breathe out even slower. A chill lingers in the air, not biting, not harsh, but enough to make the blanket over your shoulder feel like a gift. Tonight, there is no hurry. You can feel it, the slow, soft pull of time. Let your eyes drift just a little. Let your breath find its rhythm. Now, imagine a world where life moved at this very pace. The village sat quiet beneath a ceiling of clouds that never truly lifted. Even in the brightness of day, the light felt dimmed, as though the sky held back its warmth. The earth was soft with spring thaw. The air still clung to the memory of frost. And the trees that circled the town stood tall and close, their trunks black with age, their leaves slow to uncurl. Few dared go far, not because of what they had seen, but because of what they could not name. The trees whispered and leaned together, blocking out the sky. His voice did not rise. It pressed down, heavy and even, filling the space with a weight that could not be lifted. Children sat still beside their parents, their eyes lowered, their hands folded. No laughter, no whispers, no movement. Just the steady hum of words and the cracking of the fire behind him. Paths disappeared if left unused. Light seemed to twist between the branches, and no one trusted what they could not see with their own eyes in daylight. But stories, real or imagined, spread like roots underground. Not loud, not wild. Just a single thought that passed from one person to the next. Something unseen, perhaps, but not unfelt. Something that waited behind every door and in every silence. They shaped how people saw one another. They curled into their thoughts at night. Strange behavior? Sudden illness? An animal born twisted. A harvest spoiled too early. Each could be nothing. Each could be something. The forest was not just wilderness. It was a place where the world thinned and other things might live. There was a stillness here, not of peace, but of watchfulness. The soil was stubborn, filled with stones that cut hands and dulled blades. Women moved between garden beds and water barrels, lifted baskets, stirred pots, spun wool into thread, always busy, always quiet. The day began before sunrise and ended when the dark made work too dangerous to continue. Candles were expensive, and darkness was not to be wasted. The kind that settled in the corners of rooms and lingered behind closed shutters. Homes were built from thick logs and wide stone chimneys, their roofs steep to shed the heavy snow. Inside, the floors creaked with every step. The walls held the smell of ash and wool and drying herbs. The words of the Bible shaped thought like clay, molding speech, guiding hands, settling deep into the bones of each day. Children learned not just how to read, but how to fear. Fear was not always sharp. Sometimes it was quiet, like a thread running beneath every moment, shaped the way doors were shut, how footsteps paused before entering a room, how a name was spoken. The world was not only full of rules, it was full of meanings, signs, and silences. Fires were kept low to conserve wood, their coals glowing deep and red. The silence in each home was filled only with the rhythm of small chores, the scrape of metal against wood, the sound of pages turned in careful hands. It was a time when the lines between belief and life were thin. The forest that bordered the village was vast and unknown. In the fields, men worked slowly, breaking hard ground with iron and muscle. The town gathered for worship every Sabbath, sitting in rows of cold wooden benches, unmoving, unsmiling. As the minister spoke of sin and grace and eternal fire, news came slowly and changed even slower. The outside world was far away, spoken of in passing, in letters from distant colonies or from men returning from the coast. And in the quiet of this slow-moving life, in the hush that pressed into the spaces between prayers, a seed of fear was beginning to grow. Her name was Mercy. She lived in a house at the edge of the village, where the trees grew closer to the roof and the garden stayed damp long after the sun had passed overhead. She moved slowly, not out of weariness, but with the kind of care that comes from knowing the day was long and must be approached gently. Mercy bent to touch the earth, her fingers moving without thought. She knew which plants needed thinning, which ones would bloom early, which ones to gather before the sun grew too high. She worked with a rhythm that made no noise, each motion smooth, steady, and unhurried. She did not marry. She had no children of her own. She spun wool by the fire, wove herbs into bundles, whispered to the cat who followed her from room to room. She only nodded once, slowly, before turning away. There were others. A boy who hummed to himself in a high voice, even during the service. An old man who claimed to see lights in the forest. A girl who never spoke, though she heard every word. But it was Mercy they noticed most, because she was kind, she was different. Because she was always watching, and the village did not know what she saw. She knew the shape of her life, and she walked within it without fear. Her sleep was deep. Her dreams were quiet. Her days passed without hurry. She visited the graves of her parents once each season, placing a single stone on the mound and standing in stillness. She read the scriptures with a hand on the page, as though the words might rise up and speak back to her. She knew how to treat fever and when to plant by the signs in the sky. She said strange things sometimes. She looked into people's eyes too long. They called her peculiar. They called her gifted. They called her something not quite one of them. She dressed in linen and wool, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and stepped outside into the soft breath of morning. The house was small, just one room with a low ceiling and a loft for sleeping. The walls were lined with dried herbs and bundles of cloth. Roots with a stone, her hands stained from years of bark and berry. A small child from the village came to her door with a cough that had not gone away. Mercy gave her a wrapped bundle of leaves to steep in water, along with a soft word and a pat on the head. The mother waited outside, silent, her eyes on the ground. A kettle hung always above the fire, where something warm was kept simmering, even in the hours when no one was eating. At the meeting house she sat alone, always at the back, always watching. She sang softly, but her voice was rarely heard over the others. She knew the verses by heart but never turned the pages. She left before the final prayer, walking the long path back to her house beneath the trees. Mercy had lived in the village all her life, but people still spoke of her as though she had only just arrived. She rose before the light. Her feet found the floorboards without sound. The garden had already begun to stir. Dew clung to the leaves, and the soil held the scent of rain. Inside, she lit the fire again, fed it with dry twigs, and placed a small pot beside it. Mercy spoke little in gatherings. The other women spoke of her, not unkindly, but with caution. But Mercy never seemed troubled. Her days were full and quiet. Children watched her from a distance. They dared each other to follow her home. But she never scolded them. She was not the only one the village whispered about. The morning came with gray light, soft and even, spreading across the fields like a veil. Mercy stood at her door with a basket tucked under one arm and her shawl wrapped tightly across her shoulders. The air held the scent of damp moss and last night's ash. The sky promised neither storm nor sun, only the still hush of a long, cool day. She began walking down the narrow path toward the deeper woods, the ones past the last fence, where the trees no longer had names and the birds sang in odd rhythms. Her steps were slow, not cautious, only measured. The village appeared slowly through the trees, its roofs hunched low, smoke curling faintly into the sky. She moved past the last line of pines, her boots brushing over the soft earth, and stepped once more onto the familiar path. A dog barked in the distance. A door closed. A voice called out and was answered. The rhythm of the village carried on as it always had. She paused often to kneel near the base of trees, brushing aside wet leaves with her fingers, seeking a certain root or fern. The forest did not wave or whisper, but it seemed to watch her go. A silence began to settle over the village once more, not a silence of peace, but of waiting. She stepped inside, placed the basket on the table, and began laying out the herbs to dry. Each had a place. Each had a purpose. She moved without thought, only with the care of one who knew that everything in the world, even the quiet things, had meaning. The air cooled further, and the light dimmed in soft layers. She crouched beside it, cupping her hands to drink, the cold biting into her palms. Her basket was full now, not heavy, but rich with color and texture. Pale roots with curling ends, leaves as soft as feathered moss, twigs with buds just beginning to form. She pulled a small cloth from her pocket and unwrapped a piece of bread. Chewing slowly, watching the light filter through the canopy above. The world around her held no noise, but the sounds of trees speaking to one another in their slow, leafy language. A bundle of roots grew nearby, tangled and half-buried. She reached into the soil without hesitation, drawing them out one by one, shaking them clean, placing them into her basket with the others. Mercy stepped over fallen logs, her skirt brushing against the ferns. A squirrel darted up the side of a trunk and disappeared. Somewhere behind her, a woodpecker tapped. There were no paths here, only suggestions in the undergrowth, lines that others might miss, but Mercy followed them easily. This was not a place she feared. She had come here for years, each season teaching her more about what thrived in shadow and what bloomed in silence. Her hands knew the shape of what she was looking for, long before her eyes confirmed it. The forest accepted her without question. The leaves barely rustled at her passing. The branches above shifted just slightly, letting in threads of silver light. In her basket, sprigs of green began to gather, their scents rising faintly like breath. Deeper into the woods, the trees grew closer. She paused by a stream no wider than her arm, the water moving lazily over smooth stones. By midday, she sat on a fallen tree to rest. As she made her way back, the air began to warm, just slightly enough to loosen her shawl. At her door she paused, looking back once toward the trees. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees, and the first breeze of evening stirred the leaves. The light was fading, slipping slowly from the edges of the room like water finding its way through old stone. Mercy moved about the house in that quiet hour before full dark, when the colors dimmed and everything softened. She lit a candle, the flame trembling before steadying, casting a warm glow over the wooden table where the herbs now lay in neat bundles. The scent of the forest still clung to them, earth and root and leaf, mingling in the air like a slow breath. She poured water into a small clay pot and set it over the fire, which had burned low but steady throughout the day. The wood popped gently, the heat whispering upward into the room. Her hands trembled as she spoke, though her voice was low. Mercy did not answer right away. She moved to the shelf, selected a small bundle wrapped in cloth, and placed it gently into the woman's hand. Smoke rose faintly from chimneys, disappearing into the thickening dusk. She stayed only a moment longer before rising, clutching the bundle to her chest, and disappearing into the night. Mercy watched her go, then closed the door behind her, locking it with care. Lamps glowed behind windows, their light golden and small. The room had grown darker still. Shadows stretched along the ceiling, across the floor, into the spaces between the walls. Outside, the wind had picked up, not loud, only present, brushing against the wooden walls like a slow breath. The cat shifted in sleep. The room was wrapped in warmth and silence, the kind that held the body and soothed the mind. Mercy placed the empty cup on the table and lowered herself onto the bed tucked beneath the loft. Not all at once, first one, then the other. Her breath grew deep and even. The fire dimmed again, the light soft as thought, and the night, thick with dreams not yet begun, held everything gently in its arms. She pulled a wool blanket over her legs, its weight familiar, grounding. It was the hour when the world seemed to exhale, when even the restless found stillness, and the air itself grew heavy with rest. As the water warmed, she crushed a few dried petals between her fingers and let them fall into the pot. The cat curled near her feet, its breath slow, its body warm against the cool floor. Not loud, just a single sound in the stillness. Mercy rose without hurry and opened it. A young woman stood there, her cloak drawn close, her hair damp with evening mist. She did not speak at first. Her eyes were tired. Her mouth moved as though remembering how to shape words. Mercy nodded once and stepped aside. She sipped from a cup held in both hands, the warmth seeping into her fingers. Her eyes moved over the room without focus, not searching, just resting. The candlelight flickered against the walls, dancing across shelves lined with small jars, pieces of stone, lengths of twine, and folded cloth. Each item had a place. Each one had waited its turn. The scent was sweet and familiar, something meant to ease the body and settle the breath. Her hands moved with calm purpose, her shoulders relaxed, her steps unhurried. Outside, the village had grown quiet. The last of the children had been called in, their footsteps muffled by the soft earth. Doors were shut, shutters drawn. Mercy sat beside the fire with a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Knock came once at the door. The woman entered and sat on the stool near the hearth. She said she could not sleep, that the nights had grown long, and her thoughts would not quiet. She spoke softly, only a few words, enough to be heard, enough to calm. The woman nodded, her breath slowing. The fire crackled gently, its light reaching into the corners. The candle burned low, the flames from the hearth dimmed to a glow. Her eyes closed. The candle was nearly gone, its flame flickering low, then rising, then low again, like the slow rhythm of breath in a sleeping room. The air was cool and still, with only the soft hush of wood settling, the faint creak of rafters, the distant murmur of branches. Mercy lay beneath the blanket, her hands resting on her chest, her body still. Her face was calm, her brow smooth, her breath deep. Each exhale softened the edges of the world, blurring the corners, dimming the shapes, drawing the night in closer. The fire on the hearth had faded to embers, their glow quiet and steady, pulsing in the dark. The cat no longer stirred, lay curled in a perfect circle, tail tucked to nose, a small shape of stillness near the warmth. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a long sigh, brushing gently against the eaves, stirring the edges of dreams. The world held its shape, and then loosened it. Held again, then softened once more. In the loft above, the night pressed in close. The forest beyond the village stretched wide and silent, its roots deep in the earth, its limbs swaying in the dark. Among the trees, the leaves whispered to one another, speaking in circles, repeating what they had heard, forgetting, then remembering again. As the people who moved through the day with careful steps now lay still, wrapped in blankets, breathing softly, dreaming slowly. Their thoughts drifted through fields and kitchens, along old roads, through doorways now closed. Then only smoke, curling upward, fading into the dark above. The embers glowed a little longer, then they too dimmed. The room was all stillness now, not empty, only full of what cannot be seen. Full of rest, of warmth, of dreams just beginning. They dreamed in shadows and candlelight, in footsteps and sky. They dreamed in the language of silence. The stream moved slowly over smooth stones, its surface broken only by the smallest ripple, the faintest light. An owl blinked once in the high branches and tucked its head beneath a wing. The village slept, every house dim, every window dark. The night deepened, the wind slowed. Time stretched thin and wide, like mist on water, like smoke on breath. Nothing hurried now, nothing pressed forward. The last flame in the candle wavered, a final shimmer. And so the night carried on, slow and quiet, with the rhythm of wind. A fire long gone cold, of breath, of sleep, of breath again.